On day 1 after activating Infernum mode, I decided to become a rogue, and looking back on this decision now, it was a very poor decision. The first thing that I noticed was how fast the enemies were. Like, take a look at this pinky here. It is charging at me faster than Usain Bolt. After taking forever to kill the pinky, I decided to go to the right, and I found a cave to the right, so I went mining. This is where I noticed that it's not just the pinky that was fast, it is every single monster in this game. They are so fast. All the enemies have their share of buffs, but I also have my share of buffs. I have increased movement and mining speed. I ended up staying in this cave throughout the rest of the night and into day 2. It was a great cave. It had a mushroom biome, I got a trident, there were lots of chests and lots of ore, you know, all the basic stuff. After I was finally done mining, I decided to make a house so I didn't screw myself over when nighttime came. Once the house was made, I started smelting ores and seeing what I could craft. I ended up making a bunch of iron franciscas cause I'm a rogue. I then made NPC housing and got back to mining. At the end of the day, I wanted to figure out what armor to make, and I decided on the rogue armor made out of stuff from the sulfuric sea. On day 3, I realized that zombies can open doors, so that's fun. After that wonderful revelation, I began traveling to the sulfuric sea. On my way there, what I wanted to get done ASAP was making NPC housing in different biomes so I could get the pylons and travel easier later on. I found a lot of weird things while traveling. I ended up getting a rover drive, which is crazy to get off rip. I found a weird shrine right underground. I thought I was going to have the enchanted sword, but it didn't. And I found a big mahogany tree that was very deep and led to a beehive. In the end, I ended up not being able to make it to the sea. Once I was home, I noticed that there are a whole bunch of Infernum only achievements, which is really cool. I spent the entirety of day 4 in the mines, just loading up on all sorts of ores and goodies, and there were so many enemies in the caves. On day 5, I made more NPC housing and ended up settling on gold armor. I wasn't very satisfied with the gold armor, so after I made it, I decided to continue looking for the sulfuric sea, but I ended up on the wrong side of the world. On my way to the other side of the world, I found a cool little shack in the tundra. It was very cozy. By the end of day 5, I ended up getting to the sulfuric sea. On day 6, after doing a little bit of research, I realized that I can only get what I need for the armor during the acid rain event. I then spent the rest of the day mining yet again. This mining continued into day 7, and can anybody tell me why there's a fucking wraith in the cave? It is not hard mode, why is there a wraith? I then spent the entirety of day 7 in the mines yet again. But don't worry, because after this I actually get to some good shit. I'm not just going to be in the mines the entire game. On day 8, I made the poison pack, and it was pretty good. Afterwards, I got started on the elevator. Once nighttime had arrived, the Eye of Cthulhu spawned, and it ended up showing this really cool intro screen that stated the boss's name. But I obviously lost in the end. After dying, I got the first of many achievement. I finished off the day making a quick little arena. On day 9, things were really starting to pile up, so I decided to make magic storage. Afterwards, I started getting the materials to make the Desert Scourge spawner, but I got interrupted by a shell that takes me to the ocean. After I had regained consciousness from the shell thing, I went back to the underground desert and ended up just finding a Desert Scourge spawner. I spent the first part of day 10 trying to defeat the Desert Scourge, but when I realized I couldn't, I decided to go get more hearts. After getting enough hearts, I defeated the Desert Scourge on day 11. I then began farming the Desert Scourge because I wanted to get the Scourge of the Desert, which was a rogue weapon, and I ended up getting it after 2 tries. Afterwards, I began making the basement look a little better with a very simple design. I also ended up adding a trophy room for the new Infernum trophies that you get from every boss. On day 12, I made the rogue version of Victide armor, so now I have stealth. Stealth increases the damage of my first attack, it does a special move that varies between weapons, and it can also do a bunch of other things with equipment, like this. Afterwards, I made the fishbone boomerang and tried fighting the Slime King, but kept losing because I'm too slow, so I went to go get Hermes boots. I couldn't find any Hermes boots, so I just got the materials to make some. I spent almost all of day 13 fighting and losing to the Slime King. Now there was obviously something that I needed to do to be able to beat him, so I spent the rest of the day getting my last 2 hearts and lighting up the arena. On day 14 I fought the Slime King and I literally ended up beating him, but died during a fucking like cutscene thing at the end and it did not count. But by the end of day 14 I had finally defeated the Slime King. Very early the next day I tried the Eye of Cthulhu a few times and I honestly think I can beat it. Once day had come, I entered the sunken sea and tried fighting the giant clam, but it was hard. At the end of the day I defeated the Eye of Cthulhu. On day 16, I completed the Acid Rain event and made the sulfurous armor that I originally wanted to make at the beginning. Later on, I decided to fight the giant clam again, but it was still too hard, and I realized then that I can't just half-ass everything, so I need to make an arena for it. At the end of the day, I wanted to test out my new armor and the fact that I can buy potions from the one lady now on the Eye of Cthulhu, and it was such an easy dub. The next day, I made the giant clam arena and defeated the giant clam. Afterwards, I got some rogue weapons from a fish-like NPC that spawned right after the clam died, and the sand dollar I got from it is pretty good. On day 18, I made the Crabulon arena and defeated the Crabulon right away. After it had been defeated, I went back home to look at the loot, but a goblin army showed up as soon as I got up, and it spawned enemies like crazy, so I went right back underground to look at the loot. I ended up getting the Micro Root, and it's this badass weapon that I used to destroy the goblin army. Speaking of destroying, I also used it to destroy a little piggy right outside my house. I ended the day by building an arena for the Brain of Cthulhu. I spent the entire next day trying to defeat the Brain of Cthulhu, but I kept losing over and over and over until I finally defeated it right at the end of the day. On day 20 I made a whole bunch of sludge spotches because they do a shit ton of damage and began attempting the perforators, and I got pretty far for my first try with no arena and no potions. After dying a few times, I just decided to give up and finish the elevator to get Hellstone. While I was in hell, I got a whole bunch of Hellstone and also got a rogue weapon called the Ashen Stalactite, which seems pretty good. I then used the Hellphone to make some of these Infernal Cree. Using the new weapons, I defeated the perforators the next day. Using the materials I got from the perforators, I made a weapon called Tooth Balls, and they were pretty fire. I then began mining a new ore that generates up in this cloud islands called Aerialite ore. I then used the ore to make the Sky Stabber and the Turbulence. Both the weapons are good, they just had low damage, so I need the Goblin Tinker to make them even better. I finished off the day looking for the lab in the sunken sea so I can make the tracking disc. On day 22, I found the lab and ended up destroying the entire lab so I can make one at home, and after spending the entire day building it, it doesn't even look that good. On day 23, I made the trekking disc and it turned out to be pretty mid. Afterwards, I decided to make the Skeletron arena, and I really wish I would have known what the Skeletron fight would have been like before I made the arena, so I could have made it significantly better. But I ended up finishing in the old arena regardless and lost to the Skeletron. I spent pretty much the entire next day looking for an Anklet of the Wind, and though I couldn't find it, I did find a bunch of unicorns, so that was pretty cool. At the end of the day, I lost to the Skeletron again. Now, Skeletron was the next boss to fight on my list, and what pissed me off was that I could only fight him once between every single day, so once every like 24 minutes, and having to wait every single time just to lose after 5 seconds and try again was super duper annoying. Day 25 was literally a repeat of the day prior. I was looking for an Anklet of the Wind, couldn't find it, and lost to the Skeletron again. On day 26, I found an Anklet of the Wind in this super cool jungle city type thing. I had no clue what it was there for, but it looked like some sort of an arena. I ended up using this arena to try fighting the Queen Bee, but lost. Now, it's become a pretty common theme here that I just don't hit record for some aspects of each of these videos, and I forgot to record days 27 through most of day 30, but all that happened was I had to switch to melee. This mode was too hard and the rogue class wasn't enough defense, didn't have enough damage, and I'm just much better at melee regardless. So I ended up switching to Hellstone Armor, getting the Fiery Great Sword, getting the Vein Burster, and getting the Biome Blade. I did start recording though for the best part of day 30, which was defeating the Queen Bee, finally. I finished off the day extending the trophy room. I spent all of day 31 trying a bunch of stuff to prepare for the Skeletron. I made a fire flask, I got wrath potions, I made the arena bigger, but despite all of that, I still lost at the end of the night. On day 32, I reforged all of my gear to gain an extra 24 defense and 6% damage reduction. I was at the point where there wasn't much else to do but wait for the Skeletron, so I decided to skip over the Skeletron and go to the next boss, which was the Slime God. So I made the arena near my house bigger and attempted the Slime God, but he fucking ran away? He ran away like a little bitch? What was up with that? Afterwards, I ended up losing to the Skeletron again, but if you notice, I did get closer. I did get closer to defeating him. I ended the day fighting the Slime God again, and he ran away again? What is going on? What is going on? None of the issues with the Slime God mattered anyway, because I ended up defeating him the next day and making the Fractured Arc and Statagel armor. But regardless, I still lost to the Skeletron. On day 34, I just decided I'd continue skipping over the Skeletron and move on to the Wall of Flesh, so I began making the Hell Highway. I ended up finishing the Hell Highway on day 35. You guys are never going to believe this, but guess what happened? Early on day 36, I lost to the Skeletron again. I'm getting fucking sick of this. I don't know how to beat him. I don't know if I'm ass at the game or if this guy is just way too hard, but either way, this shit is awful. I continued to fight the Wall of Flesh for most of day 36, but realized that the Hell Highway needs to be way longer than it usually is. Like way longer. I ended up continuing the Hell Highway for the rest of the day, not even bothering with the Skeletron right now, and then finished it on day 37. Now that the Hell Highway was finished, I made a bed on the left side of it for me to respawn at while I tried to defeat the Wall of Flesh. I spent the next 3 days trying to beat the Wall of Flesh. I fought him over and over and over and over and over, and still could not beat him. My biggest issue is that the Roof of Hell just wasn't high enough. Every time I would fight him, the little eyes that would hang off the wall would always hide up in the blocks and it would prevent me from hitting him. After spending some time raising the Roof of Hell, I had finally bested the Wall of Flesh. Oh my god, yes. Oh my god. Oh my god, I thought I fucked it up right there at the end. Holy shit. On day 41, I was gonna mine altars to get the hard mode ores, but I had totally forgotten that you have to kill a mech boss before any of the ores even spawn. I went to go mine the altars regardless, and the Crimson biome had been completely overtaken by the Astral biome. From the altars, I got a bunch of Souls of Night, so that was pretty cool. Afterwards, I made a Bloody Worm Scarf, and I was just trying to figure out what to do. On day 42, I made a quick arena to fight an Earth Elemental because I read online that they can drop some pretty good melee weapons. While waiting for one to spawn, I fell down the elevator a bit to kill an enemy, and I saw that Palladium had already spawned, so I spent some time getting some of that. I then made the Palladium Armor, the Palladium Sword, and the Sergeant United Shield. It's just Captain America's shield. Afterwards, a Blood Moon arose, and I used that opportunity to kill a bunch of clowns to get a lot of banana rings, and they come in very handy. The next day, I used the banana rings to finally defeat the Skeletron. Afterwards, a goblin army showed up, and let's just say the Sergeant United Shield is very, very fun to use. I then spent the rest of the day doing all sorts of random tasks. I made the Flask of Ichor, I found the mechanic, I got an alchemy table, I made a whole bunch of life force potions, and I messed around with the Zerg potion. And the Zerg potion just increases enemy spawn rates like crazy. On day 44, I defeated the Crimson Mimic and got the Celestial Claymore, and it is a fucking amazing sword. I then went to go break more altars to get more Souls of the Night for future crafting. While doing this, I got a weapon called the Evil Smasher, and it is good. Afterwards, I began farming Crimson Mimics for the Flesh Knuckles, and once I eventually got them, I made the Berserker's Glove. The next day, I made underground housing near Hell in the place I get Souls of Light so I can get the pylon. I then noticed that the Clother sells this thing called a Counter Scarf, and it is pretty much like the Shield of Cthulhu, but much better. It allows me to dodge attacks by dashing into them. It's awesome. Later that night, a Blood Moon arose, and I thought that was the perfect time to get all of my pylons. So I got the Hollowed Pylon and the Snow Pylon. On day 46, I upgraded my boots to the Terror Spark boots and also farmed for Souls of Light so I can make the Angel Wings. I then thought it was a good idea to get the Warrior Emblem from the Wall of Flesh, and after fighting the Wall of Flesh, I can beat it with no struggle whatsoever. I ended the day making Angel Wings. They give me plus 20 max life, plus 10 defense, and plus 2 life regen, so they were pretty good. On day 47, I got all of the materials to make the Cryo Key in order to summon the next boss on my list, Cryogen. While getting the materials, I also happened to get this summon called the Ancient Ice Chunk that spawns these little ice clasp things, and they're pretty good. After making the Cryo Key, I made the Cryogen Arena, and then defeated the Cryogen on my first try. I am so overpowered at this point. This boss fight was so easy. From the goodie bag, I got this weapon called the Avalanche, and it seems really good. After sifting through all my loot, I remembered that Cryonic Ore spawns the snow biome after the Cryogen is defeated, so I went to go get some of that, but I can't get it till more mech bosses are defeated and I'm able to make the Drax. I ended the night defeating the Destroyer on my first try. What is going on with this mod? I thought this was supposed to be harder. This is so easy. I spent the morning of day 48 getting all the Orichalcum ore that I need. Once I was done doing this, I was going to go back up and make the armor and the weapons and everything, but the pirate army showed up, so I had to deal with them first. After they were dealt with, I made the Orichalcum armor. Later that night, I ended up defeating the twins. Super early the next day, I also defeated the Skeletron Prime. Thanks to me beating all these bosses in super quick succession, I obviously had to extend the trophy room. Afterwards, I spent the rest of the day getting all sorts of ores. I got Cryonic Ore, Hollowed Ore, Titanium Ore, and Adamantite Ore. I spent all of day 50 making and upgrading literally everything that I have. I upgraded from the Counter Scarf to the Evasion Scarf, I made the Amalgamated Brain, I made the Angel Treads, I made the Mechanical Glove, I made the Charm of Myths, I made the True Knight's Edge, I made the Daedalus armor, and I upgraded the Biome Blade. I spent the next 3 days going back to fight all the bosses that I guess I accidentally skipped. I ended up defeating the Brimstone Elemental on day 51, defeating the Aquatic Scourge and the Post-Aquatic Scourge Acid Rain event on day 52, and defeating the Queen Slime on day 53. After defeating the Queen Slime, I went to the jungle to go make the Plantera Arena, but as it turns out, the arena I used for the Queen Bee is actually meant for the Plantera. During this, I accidentally spawned the Plantera. I lost, obviously, but I did get pretty far. Now, I don't want to skip any more bosses, so I ended the day losing to the Calamitas clone. I spent the morning of day 54 losing some more to the Calamitas clone. Afterwards, I began making my own planetary arena, because honestly, fuck the naturally generated one. I want mine with all the teleporters and everything. Later that night, after a few more tries, I defeated the Calamitas clone. The next day, I'm not sure why I didn't do super much, but in my notes, all it says that I did was I made the Ark of Ancients, which is an awesome, awesome sword, and then lost to the Planetara at the end of the day. On day 56, the Planetara despawned literally right in front of me, so I don't know what was up with that. It doesn't matter though, because afterwards, I just barely managed to defeat it. After defeating the Planetara and doing some research into some weapons, I realized I'm going to need quite a few broken hero swords, so I teleported to the jungle temple to get solar tablet fragments. Super early the next day, I started the solar eclipse and did the entire thing. The entire thing! And all I got was one broken hero sword, which I used to make the Tyrant Yarum's ulti sword, which is, in my opinion, one of the best swords that you can use in this game. I spent pretty much all of day 58 trying and failing at defeating the golem because it is so hard. How did they turn one of the easiest bosses in vanilla Terraria to one of the hardest in this mod? After giving up on the golem for a little bit, I spent the rest of the day searching the dungeon because I know I'm going to need vampire knives. I spent a pretty good chunk of day 59 still searching for these vampire knives, but I just can't fucking find the chest. So I just went home and made it using ectoplasm and the key. Using the vampire knives, I went to go fight the golem again, but still kept losing over and over. After continuously losing over and over, I was wondering if there was anything else I could do other than fight this goddamn boss, and there was, because I didn't even realize I was skipping 2 other bosses. I ended the day making the Leviathan arena. I then defeated the Leviathan and its girlfriend Anahito the next day. Afterwards, I spent the rest of the day losing over and over and over to the Astrum Ares, but I kept getting so close to defeating it. On day 61, I defeated the Old One's army and defeated the Astrum Ares, which required me to extend my trophy room yet again. On day 62, I finally defeated the golem. After that super hard fight, I went and made beetle armor, and I also made diving gear so I can go into the abyss and get scoria ore. While getting the ore, on day 63 I ended up dying in the abyss to a giant squid. Later on, I decided I wanted to make new weapons because I knew I was not going to be able to handle the lunar events with how I was now. At the end of the day, I lost to the Plaguebringer Goliath. The next day I defeated Duke Fishron and spent the entire day farming him so I could get this weapon that I never ended up getting. I forgot to hit record for day 65, but all that happened was I ended up doing the Old One's army again to defeat Betsy. On day 66 I tried to beat the Plaguebringer Goliath a whole bunch of times, but I could barely get past the first part. I gave up on beating that boss for now and started a solar eclipse so I could get a death sickle so I can make the upgraded version of it, the Soul Harvester. I didn't want to go back to the Plaguebringer Goliath, so I instead skipped over it and ended up defeating the Ravager first try. The next day I used all that scoria ore that I got a while ago to make hydrothermic armor. I was hoping that this armor was going to be like the breakthrough between me and defeating the Plaguebringer Goliath, but I just still could not defeat it. Okay, you guys are gonna hate me, but I also forgot to record day 68. But all that happened was I defeated the lunatic cultist and made the Asgard's Valor. Don't worry, this whole recording thing won't happen again, I promise. I spent all of day 69 just doing the lunar events. I took down the Solar, Vortex, and Nebula Pillar, and I also made the Asphalt Path for the Moonlord. The next day, I ended up finishing the Stardust Pillar, and the Moonlord spawned as soon as I defeated it, and I teleported home. I don't know what happened, it was fucking weird. After that whole confusing fiasco, I decided to spawn him again myself, and what he does is he creates his own arena when you spawn him, so making the Asphalt Path was for nothing. I then spent days 71 through 74 fighting the Moonlord over and over and over again, and I just could not beat him. I did not know what else to do. On day 73 I even tried beating the Astrum Deuce, which was the boss before him, and I still couldn't do it. I had no clue what to do. After like literally an hour of trying, on day 74, I started the final Moonlord fight. Oh my god. Oh, my heart is beating through my chest. Oh my fucking god. Finally. Oh my god. The Moonlord had finally been defeated and my suffering was finally over. I spent the rest of day 75 just making stuff using all the Luminite I got, because the Moonlord gives you a lot of Luminite in this Calamity mod. I ended up making the Seraph Tracers, I made the Ark of the Elements, and I made the Celestial Shell. Now the Celestial Shell wasn't like necessarily good, but the only reason I made it is because it grants me immunity to Holy Flames, which will come in handy for Providence. I spent day 76 and 77 trying to make an obsidian rose so I could make the Void of Extinction. In between was a whole bunch of stupid ass shit like the Blood Moon and running out of storage, but after I got through all of that, I eventually made the Void of Extinction. Afterwards, I made the Frozen Shield and ended up reforging a bunch of my new stuff, and my defense is now over 200. I spent the rest of day 77 removing a bunch of the asphalt path and cleaning up my boss checklist, which includes defeating the Deerclops and doing the Torch God thing. Since I was cleaning up my boss checklist, the next day I also had to clean up the trophy room. After cleaning up the trophy room, I spent some time trying to get the Cragmaw Mire to spawn from the acid rain, but it just wouldn't. Later that night, I finally ended up defeating the Plaguebringer Goliath, and it's kind of crazy how this boss I found harder than the Moon Lord. Early on day 79, I ended up defeating the Astrum Deuce, and since I just kept getting trophies, I spent some more time cleaning up my trophy room. Afterwards, I noticed that I needed more storage, but this time I wanted to just make the Luminite storage containers, but for that I needed the blue chlorophyte storage containers, and for that I need to make Shroomite bar, and for that I need an auto hammer, so I'm making a surface mushroom biome. I finished out the day making a huge arena next to my house while waiting for the mushroom biome to grow. I got the auto hammer on day 80 and finished making more storage. Afterwards, I wanted to move on to the next boss, and the next boss was the Burfet Vassal, whichever boss this is, I haven't heard of it before. But in order for me to fight it, I need to make a Sandstorm's Core and use it at the pedestal in the heart of the desert. Once I took this core and used it at the pedestal in the heart of the desert, it took me to this place called the Lost Coliseum. It was some sub-dimension. Now this subdimension was super duper cool. I liked the buildings, I liked the atmosphere, and while I was there I defeated the Great Sand Shark and the Bearfed Vassal. Next up on my list were the Profaned Guardians, and on the boss checklist it says that there's some sort of an area for them specifically in the underworld, so I went to the underworld and went all the way to the right, and there's this sick ass arena there. I used the sick ass arena to, my surprise, defeat the Profaned Guardians right away. From them, I got an item called the Wayfinder, and it's just used for teleportation to like a certain point on the map. I had nothing else to do, so afterwards I decided to just fight Providence right away, but the altar wouldn't work, and it wouldn't work because it wasn't the right altar. I ended up going more to the right, and there was this crystal door that seemed to open and reveal some sort of temple built in the goddess's honor. Inside this temple was another arena that was even cooler than the one outside, and I spent the rest of the day trying to defeat Providence. I ended up fighting Providence a total of 3 times. I beat her on the 3rd try, but what I didn't realize is that for the first 2 tries, it was nighttime, so I was purposely making the boss fight harder for myself. After the fight, I equipped the Elysian Aegis and began farming for Bloodstone. The farming for Bloodstone continued into day 83, but while I was doing it, I figured that this is going to take a while, so I'm going to wait till night to summon a Blood Moon to increase my enemy spawn rates a fuck ton. I also remembered that there's Eulabloom ore now, so I went and got a whole bunch of that. Using all the ore I just got, I made the True Tyrant Ulti Sword and the Life Scythe. I finished off the day doing lots of farming for Bloodstone. The next day, I also decided that I would make the Terratomir and the Terragon armor. Once that was done, I reforged all of my weapons and defeated the Dragon Folly. At the end of the day, I made a big ass arena in the dungeon to fight the Ceaseless Void. Now I spent all of day 85 making this arena. I don't know why, it was big and I guess it just took me a while. During this though, I accidentally spawned the polterghast and I obviously lost. On day 86, I ended up defeating the Ceaseless Void no problem and got the Mirror Blade from it, and this weapon was fire. Afterwards, I also ended up defeating Cygnus. I ended my day trying to defeat the Stormweaver. I had a little bit of trouble with Stormweaver on day 87, but after memorizing most of its moves, I ended up defeating it. It was now, unfortunately, time for the hardest part of this playthrough, trying to defeat the polterghast. I tried over and over and over for literally 12 days, from day 87 to day 99. I spent trying over and over to defeat the polterghast, but just couldn't, no matter what I did. Now the thing I hated the fucking most about this boss was that after I ended up defeating it, there was a death animation that lasted so fucking long. Every time I would end up defeating it, I would die to the death animation, and that happened over and over and over, until finally, on day 99, I ended up defeating it with just enough health to survive the death animation. Oh my god. 4 hours. 4 fucking hours. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, I'm shaking. My pain and misery was finally over for the meantime. I ended up getting the Banshee hook, which is a super good weapon. I then finished day 99 making the Death's Ascension and the Blood Flare armor. On day 100 I made the Crescent Moon and decided to do the Acid Rain event post Polterghast. After this event was over, the old Duke spawned. I thought it would be kind of funny to try it, and obviously I could not defeat it. Afterwards, I farmed the Profaned Guardians to get the Warbanner of the Sun to increase my damage and the Relic of Convergence so that I could try and heal myself during a boss fight. I wanted to end this video on a positive note, so I ended the day by defeating the polterghast one last time. Everything was done and over with for now, but what I did not know is that my pain was only just beginning.